So we just going live on YouTube and then we'll get started. Yes, like I mentioned, the focus will be on how to develop our own advocacy strategy, both at an organization level and even at levels of individuals, because there are some individuals who are also into advocacy. They do individual advocacy efforts. So how can we all these efforts clearly? Yes. So for you to do this, there are four foundations for delivering successful advocacy. And that is one thing that we ensure that we put in our minds if we must succeed. And these four foundations are laid on research, evidence, understanding the agenda, establishing strong partnerships and alliances, and also setting clear time frame. So how do we get moving from this side? So we say that one, you need to do research and gather evidence, because if you have a specific advocacy issue, you need to clearly understand really the issue that you want to champion. If you want to champion education, you want to champion issues on climate change, and you want to champion other similar issues, make sure you do research, you have information about the issue, both at an individual level and then also at the level of the country and at the global level. What information is there about this particular issue that you want to champion? And then you gather evidence. What evidence is already there that probably not enough thing is being done and you want to push for more action? Or what is the evidence that there's violations and you need to push for an action so that your advocacy efforts become successful? So these are key things that you need to ensure that you do, and that first thing lays a key foundation. And the second important foundation is understanding the agenda from the community to global level. So when you understand the agenda, so this means that you go and understand what conversations are happening around this issue, both from the grassroots level, that is to say, from your neighborhood, even from where you stay, from the family level. What are people's perspectives about this issue? You move to your neighborhood, you move to your Payam, you move to your Boma, you move to your county, to the state, to the national, and to the global level. Understand what conversations, what discussions are happening about this particular issue that you want to advocate on. Because when you understand the agenda, and then you are able to raise your arguments from an informed perspective. The next thing also that you might want to do is to ensure that you establish strong partnerships and alliances, because for us to achieve success, we need to work together as a team. We need to work together with people who are like-minded, people who also believe in the same agenda as you, because we say that partnership is the new leadership. When you are able to work together with like-minded team members, and then you are able to achieve a lot together. And the last thing is ensure that you set clear timeframes. By what time do you want to achieve success in your advocacy effort? So this means that you need to clearly understand in terms of weeks, in terms of days, in terms of months, and things like that. So when you're able to lay these four foundations in place, your advocacy efforts will likely succeed. So once again, ensure you do your research and gather your evidence, understand the agenda from the community to global level, establish strong partnerships and alliances, as well as set clear timeframes. So the advocacy cycle has 8 steps, and these 8 steps help an advocacy planning cycle. And one of the key steps is that is in the research level. One, ensure that you set your priorities, select your priorities, because there can be a lot of issues. Maybe, for instance, even around climate change, there are a lot of issues. Maybe it could be issues related to policy implementation, can be issues related to law enactment, can be issues related to policy implementation, issues related to policy development, and things of that sort. Like you need to make sure that out of the many things that are within the advocacy subject, select your priorities and ensure that your priorities are clear. And the next moving thing is identifying your target audience. Who do you think would be the key of your advocacy messages? Yeah? Make sure you identify your target audience. Are they going to be people in the government? Are they going to be lawmakers? Are they going to be students? Are they going to be teachers? Are they going to be climate activists? Are they going to be, who are your target audience? when you identify your target audience and then you already select your priorities, that means you are in the right track. Now you would move to developing your messages. Make sure that you develop messages that are tailored to the needs of your target audience. Also, the messages should be within the understanding of your target audience, because if you develop good messages that can be understood by your target audience, and then your advocacy will likely succeed. And of course, you need to also choose your messenger. We have what we call trust level in terms of who some audience believe as the source of information that they can trust. For instance, if you want to deliver your messaging to women, you need to choose somebody that these women can trust. If you want to deliver your message to youth, and so that you choose someone whom the youth can trust. Children, the same thing. So choose your messenger. Make sure that your messenger should be at the trust level of your target audience, so that the messages can be accepted by the target audience. Another one is to identify opportunities and activities for delivering your messages. Yes. So now you're already an advocate, and then you have an issue. You have selected your priorities. You have identified your target audience. You have developed your messages, and you have chosen your messenger. Now, the next thing is, how can you take this message to your target audience using the priorities you have selected? That means you have to select your what? Your opportunities. Identify opportunities and activities for delivering your messages. Do you want to deliver this through workshops? Do you want to deliver this through attending sessions in the parliament? Do you want to deliver this through street or road shows? Do you want to deliver this through radio programs? Do you want to deliver this through media or TV interviews? Do you want to deliver the message through speaking to people who do podcasts? How identify these opportunities and activities? When you identify these activities, and then you also do another analysis, do you think it is the right way to reach your target audience? You see? And then after identifying the opportunities, you take stock and identify gaps. Again, you do another risk analysis. You do another SWOT analysis. What are some of the gaps that are likely to occur should I go ahead with these opportunities or within these activities? Identify some gaps that may hinder the delivery of your message to your target audience. And that brings you again to, when you identify the gaps, already these gaps are risks that you are likely to face while delivering your message. That means now you have to think of, how am I going to manage this risk? Think about ways of how you will manage this risk while you deliver your messages to your target audience. And then you now move to monitoring and evaluating progress and impact in your advocacy. So these are key things that you really have to put in place if you must succeed in your advocacy efforts. And this is called the advocacy planning cycle: selecting priorities, identifying target audience, developing advocacy messages, choosing the advocacy messenger, identifying opportunities and activities for delivering the messages, taking stock and identifying gaps, managing likely risks, monitoring and evaluating progress and impact that is brought about by the advocacy. Then, this brings us to setting out the advocacy strategy. Of course, advocacy strategy should be something as simple as this. One of the advocacy thing is, of course, your desired advocacy impact and objectives. That is the first step. What is the vision? What is your vision of success for your advocacy effort? That is the first step, because that step now brings you to the second step, which is, what is your target audience? To whom are you going to communicate your advocacy messages? And then the second step is, the third step is what? What are the messages? And then the next step is our messengers. By whom? Who are going to deliver the messages? And then the activities. Are you going to do lobbying and negotiating? Are you going to do public campaigns, or you're going to do media interviews? How are you going to deliver this? And then you look at the opportunities. Where and what level? Are the opportunities at the national level? Are they at the regional level? Are they at the global level? And when will these opportunities come? You see that? And then you take stock and manage risk. That is step 6 and 7. So of course, you do a SWOT analysis. In the SWOT analysis, you see what are the resources available and what are the capacities of the human resource that you have to deliver these messages. And then you look at the budget. What are the costs and what are the sources of funds? And then you identify and manage risk as well as the challenges. So that brings you to the indicators for progress. How are you going to measure progress and success? You see, when you do that, that means you have already done evaluation. If you've achieved your desired impact, that takes you back to step one. So this is just a summary of what I explained in the previous seat. Now, in the first step of selecting your priorities, now we are going to move through those steps one after the other. Here is a tool which is called the issue matrix. We say that every advocacy strategy needs to start with a decision on what change you want to achieve. That is the first thing. You need to make a very concrete decision as somebody who is, as someone or as an organization that is undertaking an advocacy initiative. Because at the end, your strategy needs to start with a decision on what change you really want to achieve by the end of your advocacy efforts. That means you can use this tool, which is called the issue choice matrix. As a first step, you need to identify possible priority issues using your research and analysis. When you do this, that is when you can then base your advocacy strategy, and then you discuss each issue in turn. You discuss each issue in turn. You discuss each issue in turn. You work through your chosen criteria to rank, to rank, to rank, to rank each of these issues on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is maximum effectiveness. And you add up the totals. The issue with the most points should, in theory, become your advocacy strategy priority. So this is a simple method that actually you can employ. So one of the criteria, for instance, your first issue is young people cannot access contraceptives. If you're somebody who is looking at reproductive health. And then your second issue is there are no abortion services available. And then the second issue is girls are forced to drop out of school after pregnancy. So these are 3 issues, and you want to advocate on one of these issues. Now that means you need to rank them. One of the criteria is what is the level of concern for this issue? How important is it for young people? Do you think that young people are concerned that they're not accessing contraceptives on a scale of 1 to 5? And then the other one is the issue. The second criteria is the issue fits with the expertise of you and your partners. Again, do you think that you and your partners, you have the required level of expertise to actually advocate effectively on this issue? Because maybe it is a serious issue, but you and your partners, you don't have the capacity or you don't have the required level of expertise to talk about these issues. So this is one way. Another way you can also rank yourself. The next one is you have the resourcing to tackle this scale of issue? Yes. This is the second criteria. Do you think this is the third criteria? Do you think you have the resources that are needed to advocate effectively on these issues? Then you rank them. You rank them. So after you rank, then you add. We say that while in theory you do not just add up the points, in practice it is the discussion that is crucial and not just the numbers. It shouldn't be a mechanical process where you just add up numbers. Ideally, you and your partners should decide the most important issue by consensus. You may choose to focus on more than one key issue depending on your aims, resources, and capacities. Of course, the key things in choosing your priorities and the key thing in ensuring that you get the right issue to advocate on is you understand your aims as an organization or as an individual or as a company, and then you also need to take note of what resources do you have, and lastly, the capacity of your staff to deliver effectively on this issue. The second step is to identify the target audience. And here you ask yourself the question, who has the power to make this change happen? Who has the power? Okay? That means now you have to do stakeholder mapping and power analysis. This is a second tool that is very important in achieving proper advocacy efforts. And of course, this tool helps to identify and analyze decision makers and other key targets. Once you have identified the change you want to achieve, then you start to identify key individual institutions. You analyze the influence, the attitude and level of support in relation to your priorities as an organization. This table is you can use it to record this analysis. The information can then clarify who may be allies, who may be adversaries, or who are targets, and help you prioritize and strategize as an advocate or as an organization. Because those who have most influence but are most anti-priority issues will be those where the key convincing will take place. And then those with the most influence and who are most in favor of priority issues are likely to be key allies. Okay? And then those with high influence who are neutral on priority issues could well be your target issues. This means that that means when you're doing advocacy and or when you're doing organization work, you realize that sometimes the people with whom you have common things in common, most of them they are less likely to work hand in hand with you. You see that, but then instead the rest of the people, you see the rest that are somehow they have influence, but their priority issues are not similar to yours. It's very easy for you to merge and then work together. But then you need to be very careful that people with the most influence and who are most in favor of priority issues are less likely to be key allies. They may not want to work together. That is why you see there's a lot of disconnect between how organizations work. So when you're looking at stakeholder mapping or you're doing a donor analysis, you need to ensure that at least go with people who are somehow doing things that are different from you, and then you see how you can actually incorporate your programs into their programming, and then you become partners. That is how this can actually work. For instance, you can make a donor mapping or power analysis like this. You could say the government or organization name plus contact details. How much expertise do they have on your priority issue? You can rate on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is low and 5 is high. Or you can rate them qualitatively by writing description. The second thing is how much influence do they have on your key priority issue? You can rate this again on a scale of 1 to 5 or qualitatively. The next item is what is their attitude to your priority issue? How much important is your priority issue to them? Total score, you can then put a total score or summary of qualitative judgments where highest is less likely target, likely to be an ally, opponent, and then you can also see the criteria that we have mentioned in these 3 bullet points. So you need to be, like we say, that if the person is scores very high, like in this priority, the person are likely to be a target and they may not actually work with you. But then low score, it means there are high chances that you can actually work together. So ensure that you do this donor analysis and power mapping properly. This helps you understand who has the power to make change happen and helps you in identifying your target audience, your partners, and likely donors who are to support your advocacy efforts. Next is developing your messages. We say that a strong overarching message will hold your entire advocacy strategy together. And when you are developing your messages, your powerful messages should follow this criteria. One, your messages should be simple and short. Make sure that you use short sentences, you use simple English, and you don't use a lot of jargon or technical words. If you're somebody who is from low background, ensure you use words that at least everyone, even people not from low backgrounds, are able to understand what you are saying. And then your messages should be tailored to your target audience. Remember, we already say that identifying your target audience, and then include the reasons why the change is important in your advocacy. Include why any action you want the audience to take. Include any action you want the audience to take. For instance, if you're doing climate change and you want to encourage the green economy, you say, hey, plant a tree today, or help them plant a tree. Provide solutions, and of course, you need to ensure that your messages should be memorable, your messages should provide solutions, and your messages should be consistent. You should not do messages for 1 week and then you disappear for 1 week, you come back again after 1 week. That becomes something very complex. So ensure that you are consistent in delivering your messages, because we say that your overarching messages, when they are very strong, they hold your strategy together, and you are highly likely to deliver success or to achieve success in your advocacy efforts. Let's look at this, for example. An example of a message. This is a very bad example of a message. For instance, in your advocacy, you would say that we think that it is important to work with young people because young people are the future and we should involve them in all sorts of processes, particularly accountability and monitoring work because they have lots of great ideas to share. They have better ideas than lots of adults and know their situations best. Monitoring progress on things like sexual reproductive health and rights issues is really important as we know lots of young people are affected by stuff around sexual reproductive health issues. It is a big issue. I think development practitioners should work better together on lots of things like this, and the government has an important role to play too and needs to do more. Let's work together to make this happen. Go youth. Yeah, this is a very bad example of an advocacy message. Let's look at a good example of an advocacy message. Here we would say we believe that strengthening youth-led accountability is key to a strong development sector where young people, civil society, and governments work side by side to realize sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equality for all. Participatory monitoring and accountability are key components to ensuring sustainable development programs and policies work for everyone with no one left behind. A participatory approach to monitoring and review ensures a framework where all people, including youth, can have ownership of development goals and targets, with those living in poverty and situations of instability and humanitarian crisis shaping their own futures and driving their own development. We are all issuing a call to action. Through uniting as a sector, we can create an enabling environment where youth leadership can thrive, where young people, including marginalized groups, have access to the resources required to actively hold their governments to account for their commitments and are themselves held accountable by the communities they represent. So, what are the issues you have noticed here? One issue you would notice is that in the first message, there's a use of this jargon. For instance, this is a short form, and this is something that we should not encourage. For somebody who is a lay person, they may not know what this SRHR stands for. You see that? And then here, we talk of issues of inclusivity when we are passing our message. We ensure that young people, civil society, and governments work side by side, which is an element that was missing here. This element centered only on youth, on the role of youth. But in the advocacy effort, we need to ensure that our messages are very inclusive so that they are well received by all the stakeholders that are working within the advocacy messages. Next, choose your messages. Choose your message. For instance, your message can have a very different impact depending on who is delivering it. Sometimes when your messages are delivered by people that the audience don't trust, they will not take this message serious. But if you choose people that the audience trusts, then it becomes a good message that they can receive. For instance, this is Franco. Franco is a young Ugandan leading. It's a young meet Franco. He's a young Ugandan leader driving change and inspiring his community to tackle the effects of climate crisis. And he's doing this through this. Let's watch this video and see the work of Franco.
The weather is changing and the dry season is becoming drier. The wet season brings more floods. Climate change is happening fast. Our life totally depends on farming. Rising temperatures make it difficult and food becomes scarce. How water is managed will be at the center of how we adapt. This is crucial for farmers, crops, and our forests. As farmers, we knew we had to try and find solutions. One of the solutions is the water system that provides water for the plants during the dry season. We asked for support from government and environmental officers to get water system in our communities. We are all accountable. Each of us has a part to play in tackling climate change. Young people are determined to make a better world. There is no time to waste.
Yes, thank you for watching that video. And that video just tells us about the work that Franco is doing in in one of the community where he works in Uganda, and he's training farmers on climate adaptation strategies. He's also working on water systems and how best people can actually push these issues. So these are some of the key things that we can actually work towards and also adopt as we move step by step in achieving success for our advocacy strategies. The next step, like we mentioned earlier, is identifying opportunities and activities for delivering our advocacy messages. And of course, we can do this by saying by noting that it is important to think about different approaches to our advocacy. And one of the approach is what we call the insider advocacy, and the second approach is outsider advocacy. So the question is, what is the difference? What is the difference between insider? What is the difference between insider and outsider advocacy? So when we talk about insider advocacy, one, we could mean that we work with people within the entity to actually carry the advocacy work. And then outsider advocacy is where we will need to source out people from outside the entity. When in insider advocacy, the strategies used by individuals or groups who have direct access to decision makers who are part of the established power structure. That is insider advocacy. Here, in the insider advocacy, once again, you use strategies used by individuals or groups who have direct access to the decision makers or the individuals that are part of the established power structure. So some key points about insider advocacy is that insider advocacy involves working within existing systems and institutions to influence policy and bring change. For instance, if you are looking at law enactment and your advocacy effort is pushing for enactment of a certain law, or you want to put a certain bill to be passed, that means you have to work closely with people who are in the parliament. You need to work closely with the lawmakers. You need to work closely with the ministers who attend, who under whose ministry the particular thing falls. You need to work closely with the Ministry of Justice, because when you do that, then you are able to achieve the change that you want. Then these strategies again, you use insider strategy, which means that you do behind the scenes negotiations, you do behind the scenes lobbying, and you build relationships with policymakers and other influential individuals or organizations. And with these insider strategies, you are less visible to the public and you prioritize maintaining positive relationships and avoiding public conflict. So when you do the insider advocacy, you don't actually do publicity. You don't yap about the issue on social media. You don't talk about the issue on the radio. You don't talk about the issue in the newspapers and things of that sort. You do your work behind the scenes. And with that, examples of insider advocacy techniques include participating in advisory meetings, providing expert testimony, and engaging in direct dialogue with decision makers so that you achieve your advocacy goals. That is insider advocacy. And then when we talk about outsider advocacy, in the outsider advocacy, you employ strategies that are used by individuals or groups who do not have direct access to the decision makers or are not part of the established power structure. This is the key difference. With inside advocacy, you have direct access to individuals or groups that are decision makers. But in the outside advocacy, you don't actually have direct access to decision makers or people who are part of the established power structure. So some key points we need to understand if we must grasp the concept of outside advocacy is that with outside advocacy, you use alternative methods to influence public opinion and policy making when traditional channels are not accessible or effective. When you realize that the insider advocacy is not effective, then you now move to outside advocacy. In the outside advocacy now, you use the public opinion to influence policy making. And this includes things like public demonstrations, this includes things like media campaigns, it includes like organizing people in the grassroots, it includes things like writing petitions. So all these are aspects of outsider strategy. And another important aspect of outsider strategy is its resourcefulness. Outsider strategies are typically employed by individuals or groups with fewer resources or less institutional power. And examples of outsider techniques include organizing protests, using social media to raise awareness, and mobilizing public support through grassroots movement. So it is important to note that insider and outsider advocacy are not mutually exclusive, and many advocacy efforts may involve a combination of both approaches. There are some advocacy efforts that employ both outsider and insider approaches because it's like also important to consider that are both of them are important. But the choice between insider and outsider should depends on factors like the specific goals, the resources that the individual or the organization has, and also the context of the advocacy campaign. So these are two key things you need to know when understanding the advocacy. So let's look again at the insider and outsider tactics and tips for sharing messages. Of course, you can do this by reporting evidence, you connect with influencers, you secure necessary support, you consider the context in which you work, and also you should be creative, ensure that there's representation, connect recommendations at national, regional, and global levels. You do media and social media campaigns. So these are some tactics and tips that you can use for both insider and outsider strategies for advocacy efforts. Next is next tool is keep a lobby log. So the lobby log is a useful tool that can help you in advocacy efforts to help you track of who you meet, their contact details, the outcome of the meeting, and any follow-up on what is needed. You can keep a log like this: name and person of representative, name and position of representative, the place and date of the meeting, what was discussed, follow up or action points, contact details. For instance, you could say Minister of Health, you met on Wednesday, 27th of March at the Minister of Health office, room number 302. What was discussed on whether it's supportive of the work of the coalition and welcomes input, agrees government has committed to meeting key sexual reproductive health and rights policy targets, would like to meet more with young people to hear their perspectives. What is your follow-up or action points? Send data report summary of key sexual reproductive health and rights data, send over further information about the members of the coalition, arrange a follow-up meeting next month, and then you put the contact details of the person that you actually meet. So this will be a lobby tool, and this can be very important, and you can use to refer to it anytime you want to improve your advocacy work. So the next thing also is, of course, remember that all these stakeholders are human beings. So when we say all people are human beings, you know what that means. It means certain things may not go right, but we have to understand that all of us are humans. And also, we need to ask them to do things that they can actually deliver. Sometimes when we do our advocacy, we shouldn't do certain things, we shouldn't ask for certain things that are actually beyond what these people can do. Yeah, do something, ask something that you know these people can do. Be patient and think about your tone. Give them the opportunity to disappoint you. Don't overdo it. This is very, very important. Okay, yeah. That was a short break. And of course, you need to say thank you. Always thank your stakeholders. When you're doing your advocacy, it's very important to appreciate people for their effort and also for being part of their advocacy work. And in step 6, take stock and identify gaps. Sometimes you can follow all of the planning steps and and things don't work. Yeah, because sometimes you do things really right, but still things don't work. And your advocacy still goes west. So you expect that. And some of the important steps you can take when things might not be working as you hoped or planned is sit down and analyze why things are not working. What could be the reason? Analyze why things are not working. Be really honest. Be honest with yourself and be honest with the work that you do. It is okay for your advocacy strategy to change. Sometimes, yes, this means that if you do the analysis, it might just be necessary to necessitate what? Change. And you might want to do this change so that you achieve the success that you want. Next is another tool, which is the SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis examines the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, as well as threats of your strategy. So this can be in the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Helpful to achieve the objective. The strengths are very helpful to achieve the objective. Weaknesses are very harmful to achieving the objectives. And some of the strengths, you may look at internal attributes of the organization, and then also you look at the external origin or attributes of the organization. From internal origin and also external origin, you look at the SWOT analysis from all these angles. And of course, manage risks. No matter how much you plan, there are still a number of risks you could pay, you could what? You could face or you could find along the way. So ensure that even if you plan 100%, still there are some risks, there are some challenges that you will face along the way of your advocacy implementation or on the way of your advocacy efforts. So be careful and try your best to identify these risks along the ways. As you identify each of these risks, you try to analyze the risk. When you analyze the risk, manage the risk professionally, and that will help you achieve success. You can do this through the risk analysis. So this is a tool for risk analysis that helps provide guidance on how to analyze risk to your advocacy strategies. So this helps to assess what problems you might encounter and how you may manage or mitigate these problems. And you could do just a table with 5 columns. One column would be for risk, which is the possible threat. The second column would be for probability, the likelihood of occurring, where 1 is low and 5 is high. The importance, where 1 is low and 5 is high. Total risk level, the importance times likelihood, as well as the mitigation steps. For instance, one possible risk you could say is that lead partners pull out of the strategy. And so what mitigation strategy you would say? Ensure all partners feel ownership of the campaign from the start. Review all partner capacities to commit time and resources to the strategy from the start to finish. And another risk could be new member of parliament elected to lead the sexual reproductive health right policy reform. So that means now you should build relationship with established civil servants and government departments, ensure excellent strategy briefing, materials available to share with new MPs, and to bring them quickly to speed on key issues. Yeah. So this is just an example of a tool that you might want to employ and use in your advocacy planning. The last step is monitoring and evaluating progress and impact. We say that regular monitoring and evaluation helps us to assess how well we are doing against objectives that we have set and also the impact that we have set, and ensure that we use our time and resources effectively. So there are some questions that we can also ask ourselves. There are some questions that we can ask ourselves, and some of these questions include things like what worked and how well did it work. You can ask yourself questions like what did not work and why not? Why didn't it work? We could also ask things like what could be improved and how can that be improved? We could ask questions also like what worked better than expected, or what disappointed partners or community members, what messages have resonated, and how have they helped to achieve the objectives, what were the barriers to success, in these barriers, you explore both external and internal factors that barred success, and you also look at what facilitated success, including the scenarios which were not anticipated but they actually happened. So when you answer these key questions, this will help in self-monitoring and evaluation for the community networks to respond to participatory monitoring and evaluation. And remember to feedback progress to the community. The community that you work with, they are very, very important in the success efforts. So always that keep them informed about success that you are making. So that is why in project implementation, it's good to bring all your partners or all beneficiaries together in a community, because that way you are able to give them constant information on the progress that the project is making. Yes, and that is it on the key steps that we have taken you through. And with this, you now have all the steps that you need to create your own advocacy strategy. And for that, we would like to congratulate you so much. Except if you have questions. If you have questions, feel free to drop the questions. If you're following on Zoom, drop the questions in the chat box. If you are following on YouTube, you can drop the question in the comments section of the live chat, and your question will get answered. Otherwise, we want to thank you so much for your time and also for being part of this discussion. It's my sincere hope that this has been very helpful to you and will shape your efforts in trying to achieve success for your entity or even as an individual in your advocacy effort. And the next thing, of course, is if you are doing your your advocacy on social media, I would like to take you through some key things that you need to put in place. And the first thing usually is to ensure that you develop a very good social media strategy. And for you to develop a good social media strategy, there are some key questions that you need to ask yourself. And one of the questions is usually asking yourself why you are using the particular platform. Because social media platforms are very many. And for the start of your advocacy, if you're starting from afresh, you might want to choose you might want to choose you might want to choose few few you might want to choose only few social media platforms like 3 or 4, and that can then work. Like to ask yourself why you're using this platform, who will you reach on this platform, that is the target audience, how are you of course unique on that platform. So these are 3 questions you ask yourself on the first step. In the second step, you ask yourself what type of content are you going to post on the platform, how often are you going to post, based on the best practices for the platform, because every platform has best practices. So when there are best practices, then it becomes very easy for you to actually achieve what? Success. And you also look at who is your target audience. When you know your target audience, that becomes very easy. Yes, and then you measure results. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, they have built-in analysis tools. You can do a monthly analytics to check to see if your content strategy is working. You can look at issues like the accounts reach, the impressions, the profile visits, the new followers, the likes, the comments, what is working and what is not working. You can do this monthly. And then if you share photos on social media, there are some good photo policies that you should actually follow. And one of these is don't use photos that convey a sense of being staged or surprising the subject, photos that convey people as objects, continents as countries, photos without context, photos that convey sadness, neediness, or blight, photos that convey stereotypes or generalizations. When you're good photos, you need to look at photos that convey people looking at leaders, people look like they're having fun, and people being active in their own communities. So these are the photos that you should actually put on social media, because that brings good ideas, and that shows somehow pretty good messages about your advocacy effort. So for instance, you look at photos like this. You see this photo is people being sad, and you see this photo people being active and they are doing something, and you see this photo and this photo you see here, here is really good, people doing something amazing. And here you see these are all good examples of photos that you can use in your advocacy. And yeah, so these are key things that you will really need to consider, especially if you're using social media for your strategy. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat box. And also, if you watch this later on YouTube, you can drag your questions by commenting and also sharing your thoughts through the live chat. Thank you so much, guys, for following this session. As a summary, we've been looking at how to develop good advocacy strategy, and we were able to look at some of the key steps, about 5 steps that are necessary for us to achieve success in our advocacy. And we call that the 8 steps of an advocacy planning cycle. We said that you need to select your priorities, you need to identify your target audience, develop your messages, choose your messenger, identify opportunities and activities for delivering your messages, take stock and identify gaps, manage risk, monitor and evaluate progress and impact. And that will bring us to the end of our session for today. I wish you the very best of your afternoon and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.